So I think the first participant is Dr. Gurpreet Kaur. Right? You're ready? Dr. Gurpreet, you're ready?
Yes, ma'am, I'm ready.
Okay, you can begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you. A very good morning to one and all present on this platform today. My topic of presentation is Hodophile and Literature, an emerging and welcomed genre. In this regard, I would like to start with a quotation by Hans Christian Andersen, quote unquote, to travel is to live. Travel literature can be considered as a multidisciplinary genre which attempts to bring together cultural studies, literature, history, non-fiction, autobiography, geography, gender studies, as well as post-colonial literature. Curious travelers have used this genre for expressing various themes like search for identity, anxiety, conditions of exile, etc. This genre developed as an area of inquiry in the last decade of the 20th and early 21st century. For travel writing, scholars have used various related terms like travel narratives, travel literature, travelogue, travel memoirs, etc. But for one of the critics, John Bourne, travel writing is quote unquote a collective term for a variety of texts, both predominantly fictional and non fictional, whose main theme is travel. There are many scholastic interpretations of this term for whom travel writing has quote unquote four near neighbors in generic terms: the novel, ethnography, the document, and reportage. The travel writing is an outcome of a journey which involves a physical visit to various places of visitors' interest, maybe in the form of an adventure, exploration, a conquest, or an inquiry. So, without any doubt, it consists of multiple genres, and one has to agree with speak according to whom travel writing, quote unquote, has taken on a bewildering multiplicity of forms and functions. People who are fond of traveling, adventures, globe-trotting, meeting people are also known as hodophile. Hodophilia, which comes from the ancient Greek for hodos or journey, and philia, meaning love or affection, is simply the love of travel. Due to the less insightful studies in this field, this paper aims at exploring certain hodophiles who keep quenching their thirst for travel and adventure and express their experiences through structured narratives. They write and readers read and experience a kind of pseudo traveling. In this regard, Amitav Ghosh has a unique sense of places. He personally travels, experiences, gains knowledge, and then writes like most travel writers. Ghosh in an Antique Land is a text weaving together the representative techniques of historiography, ethnography, travelogue, and diary writing, bringing together elements of anthropological field work in Egypt and India, the history of a Hindu slave, of a Jewish merchant in the 11th century. Ghosh has most often written a personal diary during the field work. Quote unquote, it is not about kings, queens, courts, and battles, but about ordinary people. Most of his writings deal with exploring culture, tradition, and through traveling to different places like Bengal, believingly being his favorite place. He deals with history and background of Bengal in The Hungry Tide and Guns Island. His writings are a source of landscape, traditions of a city or a village, and of course, its history. Surely, because of these qualities, Ghosh can be considered as a master writing in the genre of travel literature, that too in long as well as short narrative forms. In his book, Gun Island, which has blurry lines between fact and fiction, his protagonist, Dean, travels from the marshy, flood prone Sundarbans Delta on the southern east fringe to Bengal to the city of Venice, which is believingly sinking slowly in Italy. Ghosh connects the present day ferments caused by climate change with the 300-year-old, the Little Ice Age, a phase of global cooling. So the basic concern is climate change and natural upheavals and crises like dead zones in ocean, mass bleaching of whales and dolphins, and devastating wildfires. Quote unquote, my book arose out of a sense of urgency. Ghosh says in an interview on livemint.com, it is very much about the world that we are living in now. Travel literature is a source of history of places, partly known, partly unknown. Kushnava Chaudhary, in his non-fictional writing, The Epic City, The World on the Streets of Calcutta, depicts the places, culture, tradition, and history of Calcutta, a former imperial capital, now officially known as Kolkata. It has been known as the beautiful city of palaces as well as the gruesome city of dreadful night. Calcutta is known for East India Company's Bengal trade and Asia's seaborne commerce. About traveling and writing, Chaudhary says in an interview, quote unquote, we human beings are not meant to live exclusively indoors. We need to hear the symphony of the street, feel the pavement at our feet. The non-fiction, The Epic City, is an autobiographical reminiscence meditating on the subjects of belongingness, homecoming, migration, and memory. Chaudhary, an American Indian, returns to Calcutta to join Statesman in 2001. He visits the vaults of his memory to compare the changes that he could find in the Calcutta he saw in his childhood and the Kolkata of the present time. It is based on his perception, his lived experiences of the places. About its overflowing details about places, Shreyashi, a critic, states, quote unquote, childhood, College Street, D.L. Roy Street, Bagmari, Maniktala Market, Statesman House, Mitra Cafe, Allen Kitchen's Shrimp Cutlet. But at times, the epic city to Chaudhary seems like a place full of unhappy souls in a race of living life in sometimes unfavorable circumstances. He states while comparing with his earlier visits, quote unquote, everything that could possibly be wrong with the city was wrong with Calcutta. He found it to be a place hot, humid, and full of dust. He adds about the weather in Calcutta, quote unquote, I woke up some mornings feeling my chest was on fire. Breathing in Calcutta was like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Then there were the mosquitoes, which arrived in swarms at sundown and often came bearing malaria. He also compares the white town and the black town, white town being manicured, administered, and didn't stink, where dogs and Indians were often not allowed. And all around the white town was the overcrowded black town. It was all then and now. White and black town were all jumbled together. He compares the people of Calcutta with Delhi, saying that if you, quote unquote, stop and ask for directions in Delhi and no one knows because no one is tricky of the city, ask for directions on any Calcutta street corner and half dozen mustachioed men will appear out of nowhere, determined to direct you somewhere. It is their city, their streets, their neighborhoods. While traveling through the streets of Calcutta, he feels that, quote unquote, those incredible delicacies you eat, the people you associate with, the things they tell you when they do adda, their constant chatting on their any subjects elevated to any an art form, all of that make you realize that the city is very lively. Chaudhary also writes about the Bengal under the black shadow of famine, which starved many to death. He writes, quote unquote, starving people begging not for rice but for the leftover water in which it was boiled. There were literally piles of corpses accumulated in the streets all over the city. Then he tries to give the reasons, quote unquote, 3 million people starved to death and the causes were man made. Moving further, it is indispensable here to write about another hodophile writing about spices and herbs which are considered as a nature's gift to the mankind. They make food enjoyable and while you travel and get to know the unknown things that too about food and spices, is something most interesting. Reading such writings turns one's mouth watery. The Flavor of Spice by Mariam H. Reshi is such a book about journeys, about recipes, stories, and all about a huge variety of spices which turn our food palatable. Reshi is an engaging and knowledgeable writer who writes on the basis of her curiosity about spices. While promoting the food literature, Reshi in an interview states, quote unquote, research, 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 do travel, taste, take pictures, and make notes. Try to notice the links between one cuisine and another, one dish and another, and never lose the sense of the magic of food. It is a book that focuses on the spices generally used in Indian kitchens and recipes. She traces their history as far as possible, sometimes investigates their strange mysteries also. For her, quote unquote, the flavor of spice is not meant to be a textbook of spices, nor is the information exhaustive. The book has been divided into six sections: the big four, the aromatics, seed spices, spice grinders, mixers, and spices abroad. Traveling and writing is a journey which goes on and on for Reshi and will never be complete. Even in the epilogue of the Flavor of Spice, she mentions that although her book has been published, yet she is on her way to Pampore in Kashmir to visit dealers in the spice of saffron. Reshi calls these spices, quote unquote, complex, magical, versatile, and eternally enriching ingredients. Basically, this book deals with the genre of history of each spice one would have ever heard about, considering its origin, its spread, its varieties and uses. The reader is taken through the shops, restaurants, the kitchens, the street, the fields where the spices are grown, and the processing factories, visiting places like Srinagar, Shimla, Lucknow, Goa, and even abroad. She meets people, having amusing interactions with them, and narrate incidents, sometimes about useful information, mostly indulging in first person narratives. This book also involves some anecdotes and tales narrated by the people she visits and meets. In an incident, a shop owner in Guntur offers a Mexican visitor a variety of hottest chilies which make him hardly any uncomfortable. He relishes and the shop owner is surprised. Reshi brings up some cultural differences while using the spices. As Mexicans use chilies for flavor, Indians prefer to use them for its hotness only. She writes, quote unquote, if you don't have Karnataka's Kundapuri chilies, you would happily use Kashmir's Pompuri ones. And this is quite true. She shares her experiences about restaurant owners. This book is an outcome of years of experience, research, written in an easy language. It takes the genre of food writing and travel literature in Indian literature to a next level. Reshi looks at each spice with a curious and questioning eye, full of an urge for knowing all: what, how, where, when, why about the spice, with enthusiasm for knowing more and learning as much as possible. She has given time, energy, dedication, and love to it, nurturing it like a small plant. It is indeed a virtual visit through the places, spice plantations, and markets. It is indeed a gallery of spices. In these writers' contexts, it can be rightly quoted by Ibn Battuta, quote unquote, traveling it leaves you speechless and then turns you storyteller. So it can be concluded here that Amitav Ghosh, Kushnava, and Reshi have written about people, places, cultures, and traditions. They have brought together facts and fiction to portray many important and indispensable aspects of human life like food, nature, environment, mythical figures, etc. They have traveled, met people, and written with beautiful descriptions portraying their keen observation skills. Their writings are a rich source of unending stories and narratives which are factual. Reading these writings, one starts having an utter desire to travel and explore the unknown horizons. Thank you for today.
Ma'am, you're not audible, ma'am.
Once again. Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gurpreet. Yeah, now the next participant is Asifi. Asifi, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am. Ask me.
Okay. Yes, yes, Asifi. You can begin.
Okay, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. I'm Aspi, MPhil scholar from Sri Ayappa College for Women, Chungangadai, Kanyakumari district. The title of my paper is Sufferings of Female Origin in the Future Earth, a study of N.K. Jemison's The Broken Earth Trilogy series. Author introduction. N.K. Jemisin is an African-American science fiction and fantasy writer. She has also worked as a counseling psychologist. Her fiction includes a wide range of themes, notably cultural conflict and oppression. Her debut novel, The 100,000 Kingdoms, and the subsequent books in her Inheritance trilogy received critical acclaim. She has won several awards for her work, including the Locus Award. The three books of her Broken Earth series made her the first author to win the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 3 consecutive years, as well as the first to win for all 3 novels in a trilogy. About the series, the Broken Earth trilogy is set on a massive continent called the Stillness. This is a far future Earth racked with periodic disasters known as seasons. These seasons aren't just bad storms, they are massive apocalyptic events that last for generations, reshaping the world and its inhabitants. Origins. Those who survive huddle into communities, protected communities that try to wait out the destruction, then crawl out and rebuild civilization before the next event. Among the survivors of humanity or origins, individuals who can draw incredible magical power from reservoirs of the earth. But while these origins serve a useful purpose for society, their training and treatment is brutal. They are taken from their homes as children and brought to the fulcrum, an order that trains and certifies them under the supervision of yet another order known as the Guardians. In fulcrum, origins undergo several sexual abuses. Yes, next. Yasun is the protagonist who is an origin. A young woman becomes entangled in a power struggle of mythic proportions. She is being seen her child murder. It's her breaking point. This is a woman who is being hit again and again, forced through pain and suffering again and again by a system that isn't going to stop. Then she will be on a journey to find her daughter who has been kidnapped by her husband after he murdered her son. In the days following her son's death, Yasun is capable of doing little more than sleeping and suppressing her thoughts. Jemison's use of second person becomes a powerful tool to allow the reader to experience and emphasize and emphasize with their suffering. Jemisin's use of "you" relates to the prevalent theme of self-hatred rooted in oppression throughout the book. Yesun experiences self-hatred resulting from her society's rigid caste system that places her as a subservient outcast. After her loss, Yesun, still trying to decide who to be. She blames herself for her son's death. As Yesun dissociates from her own body, it reveals not only a reaction to trauma, but that she wants to be anyone but not herself because of internalized self-hatred of her existence. Yesun's self-loathing induced dissociation mirrors that struggles of the Black community with their own images and standards of beauty today. By portraying Yesun and other origins oppressed by society and struggling with their images of themselves, Jemisin explores connection between these characters and Black women today who struggle with self-loathing as a result of internalized white standards of beauty. Yesun is introduced to the violence of her respective society early in her life. She gets forcibly removed from her family. Yesun is born into a society that has systemized use of and violence against origins. When her power manifests for the first time, her family rejects her and summons Kappa, an older male guardian. He takes Yesun to a new place, the fulcrum. There she is imprisoned and forced to become a living weapon. Yesun's society is built upon a foundation of subjugation and control of people like them, its women and origins respectively. Yesun suffered an extreme trauma at the hands of her husband. Yesun unintentionally yet inevitably replicates and perpetuates aspects of the violence committed against her by her society. Thus, the protagonist Yesun have been portrayed as the victim of patriarchal society throughout the series with all the oppressions, insecurity, discrimination, injustice, hatred, betrayal, and everything she encountered from her childhood. To conclude that the Brokenness Strategy demonstrates that females, whether humans or origins, have a distinct mental strength that is largely absent in males. They conquer all challenges and situations in achieving its goals and objectives, and they grasp the skill of survival in every climate changes they encounter. As a result, the Brokenness Trilogy might be viewed as a source of strength for all of the world's broken women. Throughout the series, Jemisin presents a view that whether it is present or the future, the condition of women and the sufferings they undergo will remain the same. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Asiti.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So the next participant is Baju Thomas.
Yes, madam. I'm
Thomas.
ready. I'm ready.
The topic is the
Yes.
significance of feminism and its impact of women in the 21st century inclusive society. You may begin, Baju.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. My topic is the significance of feminism and its impact on women in the 21st century inclusive society. I am a research Baiju Thomas. I am a research scholar and I am studying in the Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda and Education Institute, Coimbatore. Introduction. Feminism is relatively a new movement among women. Its goal is to improve women's status in the practice of law by solving the underlying positions that make it male-dominated. For decades, feminism has been in many forms over the globe, and it has started to affect women. The idea of enhancing women's social position is referred to be a feminist philosophy. It is shifting as feminism becomes more elaborated through a current discourse on human rights and a stronger emphasis on legalization. There was a growing adoption of the concept that women's rights are human rights as a plan and justification for feminist action. There was a shift in feminist activity away from the independent, suppressed groups and towards the integration with an inclusive society. The concept of feminism. Feminism is a concept that all people, regardless of gender, should be treated equally. The economic, social, and political interpersonal setting, it implies that men and women should be treated equally. It is difficult to argue that you are not a feminist whenever you say it that way. Yet this is widely confused idea. Women advocate gender equality in social, economic, and political efforts. Feminism is a global movement that's supported by various institutions committed to further women's rights and dignity, regardless of its beginning in the West. For decades, feminist academists have been interested in this issue of feminist identity formation and its impact on women's life. The process by which women accept and live out feminist values in their daily lives is known as a feminist identity formation. Origin and development of feminism. In comparison, feminism is relatively a new term in the English language. Many feminist, socialist, and political groups work in eradicating all types of gender inequality and ensure that all women have an equal opportunity to participate in the society fully. Feminists argue that women endure inequality and discrimination due to their femininity, and in this disparity cannot be justified. Feminism for promoting a campaign for gender equality, as per the Western feminist historian, does not matter if the institution involved name themselves feminist movement. Feminist groups and feminist philosophical and ethical ideas strive for women's rights. In the year leading up to the American Revolution, a feminist movement emerged. The feminist socialist movement was born in the wake of Western socialism acceptance by a female community. Some historians use the word feminist when discussing the modern feminist movement and its splendor to groups. Western feminist history into three different waves depend on their earliest achievement. Intensity on gender and culture difference was the second wave of feminists primarily gone through this time frame. 3 decades after the first and second wave of feminist activists, third wave feminists viewed their movement as a second wave. In the early 1990, the third wave of feminism began. The uprising was urged by the parent flow of second wave. Institutions were among the target of the second round of assault. Third wave feminism focused on the experience of women of color and lower middle class white women to avoid the refuse the essentialist ideas of feminist companion by second wave. Feminist theories. Feminism is a broad phrase that refers to the study of gender, sexual identity, gender orientation, sex, and sexuality from a political and social perspective. Feminism was developed over time from the comprehensive review of gender inequalities to a more sophisticated examination of gender and sexuality, social and performance nations. Women's studies in an academic field that examines women's sexual, cultural, and political framework and the relation between authority and physical intimacy as they interest with other identities such as race, gender orientation, economic status, and cognitive deficits, using feminist and interdisciplinary techniques to bring women's lives experience to a forefront. As per liberal feminism, women oppression stems from unequal access to justice, social, political, and economic framework. Radical feminists say that sexism is the oldest and most pervasive form of discrimination, that eradicate it requires the abolition of patriarchal and heterosexist norms. Marxist and socialist feminist. Gender equality is at the heart of capitalism. Capitalists and individual men, they believe, exploit women's unpaid home reproduction labor. Women are also used as remarkable low-wage workers. Psychoanalysis feminist. Freud theory conception were applied to gender discrimination. Its goal is to counteract psychologist theory masculine bias by proposing ideas that focus on women's mental, physical, and sexual experience. Women of color feminists have criticized feminist theories for neglecting to accommodate opposing system of oppression. Feminist movement from Africa, America, and third world groups are covered in this approach. Postmodern feminists encourage age diversity and pluralism rather than the focusing on the root cause or remedies to gender injustice. Feminist in leadership. The feminist leadership plan aimed for holistic growth strategy that would allow women to rise to position of authority. Irrespective of the fact that hundreds of books have been written to raise awareness about the importance of female leadership in any nation's progress, women are still treated as enslaved people in many parts of the globe. Feminists who prioritize women's leadership abilities claim that despite advance in social science that consider women as more than just a home servant or employee. As the philosophy of leadership, there are no limits to what a leader may accomplish when discovering the excavating talent. Anyone capable of leading, regardless of nationality, gender, ethnicity, we give the opportunity. As the outcome, blended leadership will be win out, and women-led leaders will have a better chance of succeeding in a more inclusive society. Feminism and the inclusive society. Inclusion equally of opportunity and capacity of person in the society, irrespective of race, gender, class, generations or region, from which to choose a series of social structures that regulate their relation with others are all fostered in an inclusive society. Feminism's primary goal is to deconstruct and eradicate patriarchy, a social structure in which men are considered a figure of authority and rulers in the family, economy, politics, law, education, games, and other areas. As a measure, feminist academies, especially those in leadership roles, must demonstrate the social practice that maintain gender as the norm and shed light on how it appears everyday's life. In this civilization, women are oppressed because they are assigned lower status. In patriarchal countries, both women and men may be imprisoned due to their education in a culture of male domination, particularly when it comes to gender norms and that are more limiting than liberating. Many people work within the system to resist patriarchal, whereas feminist thinkers argue that separation is the only way to create a more inclusive society. Conclusion. Feminists had a tremendous impact on women and gender. Feminist academies were the first to explore the understanding of gender. All female experts have vowed to vowed to raise awareness of gender roles in the society. Many people believe that gender is an all-encompassing term that impacts everything from a workplace to governmental legislation and policy. Gender equality is also a topic that attracting more and more attention because they focus on only on the work at hand. Men are viewed as superior leaders in many major countries worldwide. All stakeholders, especially women, must be included in accomplishing this. Regardless of this sexual orientation, everyone have benefit from their unique skills and abilities. Public discourse on needed to be issue of giving women leadership roles because women are becoming more widely understood in the 21st century inclusive society. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to present my paper on feminism. Thank you.
Thank you, Raju. And now the next participant is Ansi A. Ansi A and Dr. Virgin Nitya Veena. And the topic is the cultural cityscape of Chaudhary.
Yes, good morning, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Come on.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and good morning, ma'am. The topic that I have chosen for my study is the cultural cityscapes of Chaudhary. So, speaking about Ahmed Chaudhary, he is a contemporary prominent writer who is the author of 7 novels till date, and whose works are
Ma'am,
getting
sorry for the
recognized.
interruption, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, could you please on your video?
Yeah, I'm just trying it for a while, but just wait a minute. I will try it once more.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, just a minute. Is it visible now?
Yeah,
Yes,
you are
I hope.
visible, yes.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So the writer Ahmed Chaudhary is whose works are getting recognized all over the world, and particularly in most of his novels, he writes in respect to the cityscapes and the culture within. So this study, the paper that I'm going to present today, focuses on the chosen city space, particularly Kolkata, in Chaudhary's novels, and how the culture is get reflected through the daily life of Calcutta. And in general, the term cityscapes seems to invoke a scenic or a kind of a visual image of a cityscapes. But only after the late 20th century, the interpretation of cityscape is further taken to a wider analytical framework of spatiality and its contemporary culture within. Before that, we could see the primary focus is given to society's historical unfolding and human social life. And even on the other hand, the urban space is just reduced to a fixed place with its neutral background and social environment. But after the late 1990s, the interpretive innovation, the critical imagination, and the creativity towards the so-called urban space or the spatial studies leads to several transdisciplinary approaches. For instance, going back to the pathway, we could trace Michel Foucault, who is a famous French philosopher as well as a literary critic. Michel Foucault brilliantly enhanced his idea of the urban space with the concept of space, knowledge, and power. And similarly, Henri Lefebvre, again a French Marxist philosopher, a sociologist, and a critic of everyday life, he further takes the concept of urban space to a triple logical arguments such as the conceived space, the perceived space, and the lived city spaces. So in terms of Ahmed Chaudhary, when most of his contemporary writers kept running behind the concept of the so-called magic realism and the national narratives, I mean the Rushdian era, when most of the writers consider, particularly in India, consider the concept of magic realism as dignified form of literature, Ahmed Chaudhary stood apart from all these people. For him, the act of writing novel is more about documenting the city space in which he belongs to. So as I mentioned, he is the author of 7 novels. And when we, as a reader, when we go through his novels, we could trace the several cities, urban cityscapes. Particularly, he speaks about Calcutta, he speaks about Mumbai, as well as he speaks about Oxford. So we cannot claim Ahmed Chaudhary completely as a writer of India as a nation, because he gives equal importance to the atrocity Oxford, which is out of India, just equally as he gives to Calcutta. And his cityscapes in the novel, and moving to Calcutta. And this study, as I mentioned, it particularly focuses on the cityscape of Calcutta and how the culture is getting reflected. So the Calcutta as a cityscapes in his novels are not just meant to be treated only as a part of a setting or landscape. Rather, it is known for its the vibrant nature, the daily life, the rapid evolution, and the culture within. And by prevailing over the Calcutta cityscape and its inhabitants, he tends to idealize its culture. Though today's view of city is uncertain in the vital moment of time, it is an effective element for culture studies. And for the study of cityscapes of Calcutta, I have chosen two novels of Ahmed Chaudhary. That is, the first novel, A Strange and Sublime Address, and his fourth novel, A New World. So most of his characters, particularly in these two novels, we could see most of the important characters ends up in Calcutta from faraway places of even some other parts of the country for some other reasons. In his death novel, A Strange and Sublime Address, one could see the protagonist named as Sandeep, a 12-year-old boy. He is born in Kolkata, but due to his father's occupation, he is moved to Mumbai and he is forced to live in Mumbai. But this boy always had a passion towards Kolkata. And he normally in all his vacation, he has a habit of visiting Kolkata. And this novel is one such occasion. So once the journey is done from Mumbai to Calcutta, the entire novel is all about the visual image of the cultural cityscapes of Calcutta in the eye of a 12-year-old boy. And looking into his fourth novel, A New World, it again deals with the urban space of Calcutta through Jayajit. Jayajit is again a 40-year-old young matured man who is born in Calcutta, but he is working in America as an economic teacher, and he lives in America. So after he got broke up with his married life, he's kind of in a depressed state, and for a kind of a relaxation, he pursued his travel towards Calcutta. So in both these novels, we could see the protagonist. One is Sandeep, who is a young, just a boy, 12-year-old boy. And on the other hand, it's a 40-year-old young matured man. So these two characters, basically they were, by birth, they belong to Calcutta, but due to some other reason, they got relocated to Mumbai as well as America. And as an outsider, both these characters right now end up in the city space of Calcutta and records the cultural cityscapes in it. Even these novels tempted many critics to raise a question whether who is the real protagonist of the novel. Is it the Sandeep, or is it Jayajit? The human characters are treated as a protagonist, or is it the urban space of Calcutta is treated as the protagonist? And moving into the first novel, A Strange and Sublime Address, we could see a similar kind of experience shared by Michel Foucault to us is more visible in this story as Sandeep faces. And I would like to register the work which is written by Michel Foucault, The Walking in the City, the famous work. And in that, Foucault initiates his essay by his experience, by his view of experiencing the city of Manhattan by standing on the 110th floor of a huge building. So by standing on the 110th floor and viewing the panoramic city view of a city, the Manhattan, he could enjoy the experience, the pleasure of seeing the whole. But that's just for a moment. It doesn't long for a long time. The whole panoramic view of city fails to satisfy Crito as he stood far away from the ground reality. The reason is he could not enjoy the essence of city as he is far away from the ground reality. He could not hear the city and he could not feel the city and the cultural things which is over there. Only he could see the tiny images moving here and there. It's just a panoramic view of the city is seen over there. And similar kind of experience is underwent by Sandeep in Chaudhary's novel. We could see, as I mentioned earlier, Sandeep is living in Mumbai, and Mumbai is the richest city in our country, and he is living in the 25th floor multi-story apartment. So standing on the 25th floor multi-story apartment, that such kind of a life let him down as he is far away from the ground reality. And when he comes back to his maternal uncle's house in Kolkata, whom he addresses Chota Mama in this novel, and coming back to Chota Mama's house, his house is a middle class Bengalis house, which is very close to the ground reality. So Sandeep enjoys living here because he could see the city, he could hear what is happening in the streets, the liveliness, everything around him. And by featuring the city in the very close towards the ground reality, he brings out the industrialization, the economic stagnation, the power cuts, the climatic conditions, the rituals, the religious pujas which is taking place, and particularly the Bengali cuisine, and all sort of cultural flavors. For instance, Sandeep is not, though he is not a strong believer of God, he enjoys the tiny array of gods and goddesses which is arranged in the puja room in his Chota Mama Sangal, which includes the Lord Durga, Krishna, Ganesh, Saraswati, and Lakshmi, and so on. And also, he particularly delights in the Bengali middle class cuisine. So, Ahmed Chaudhary gives very good importance. When we read those novels, we obviously tend to go and taste those foods. That's how he writes it. And we could see, even while walking in the streets, Sandeep enjoys the aroma of the fresh rice and the fresh fish and so on, and also the origin foods or the dessert like sandesh. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. The origin was beautifully described, and also he also describes the summer preparation of jam in Bengal, in Kolkata, as well as the cheapest, the simplest middle class food with pork, rice, and yogurt. All these things are discussed beautifully. And also, he could often hear the sound of the city. So, as a reader, we not only have a visual imagination of the city, we could also hear and feel the city, as he mentions all the sounds which happens around him. Even, for instance, Sandeep often hears the sound of machines around him, which stands for the concept of industrialization, as the buildings kept on rising day by day by demolishing the old mansions, and new agricultural devices came up, the electricity, cars, and so on. Things were getting developed. And also going into the fourth novel, New World, as I mentioned, a 40-year-old man, Jayajit, who is an economic teacher in America. And he again got married to a Bengali woman named as Amala. But unfortunately, his marriage ended up as Amala decided to go with, developed an affair with some other white man and decided to separate Jayajit. So after that, they have a 7-year-old son, Vikram, and Vikram, the court ordered Vikram to stay along with his mother. And only during a periodical visit, he is allowed to meet his father. So Jayadit is in a depressed state, and for a kind of relaxation, along with his son Vikram, he travels to Kolkata, the place where he actually came from. So this place, Calcutta, as Michel Foucault says, walking in the city or walking in the streets is the best way to explore the city. We could see the streets as a venting space of his emotions, and he just rambles here and there. The urban flanner, which we call us, he keeps on rambling here and there. And while so he come across different persons belongs to different professions, like the peasants, pani puris vendors, the istri walas, as well as and also the higher officials like doctor, bank employees, and all these people that come across him. And the most interesting thing of Ahmed Chaudhary is we could come across the Ada culture very often. So Ada culture is all about, and particularly it is associated with Bengal and Kolkata. Ada culture is nothing but a kind of a conversation or a small talk, or we can call as a kind of a gossip which happens, the aimless conversation which happens between a group. And this can occur anywhere, whether it is in a home, whether it is in a veranda, or particularly the tea shops, all these places this Ada culture takes place. And we could see all the characters are knowingly or unknowingly, they automatically get indulged in this Ada culture. As Sandeep, though he is just a 12-year-old boy, he's so much interested in indulging in the conversation of the adults. Mostly this Ada culture is all about the politics, literature, art, the food and gossips and all things which is happening around them. And he gets indulged in all these conversations. And also in case of Jayajit, when he comes back from America, he unknowingly, he is very much happy in getting indulged in this Adak culture. And in the novel, Chaudhary states that because this Adak culture is something that belongs to Calcutta, and which is not available for the pleasure of Adak culture, he cannot experience it in America. And that's why he is always longing for this. When he comes back to Calcutta, he gets unknowingly indulged in all those things. So this is how beautifully Chaudhary brought out picturizes the image of a Calcutta. And I would like to conclude by saying that this study, this paper presents primarily focuses on Chaudhary's cityscapes in the novel and how he idealizes the culture of Calcutta within. Thank you.
Thank you, Ansi. So,
Thank you.
yeah, we are at the end of this session, and I would love to give my closing comments. So, Dr. Gurpreet, right? You spoke about the headophile and the literature, where we are where you put forward about the travels and the adventures of Amitav Ghosh. So this travel literature or the travel writings have gained a very great popularity from past ages. And one of the book which you have mentioned, it is that the flavor of the spice. So again, it's one of the wonderful food literature where the writer Rachel, she had been working throughout 30 years and presenting the people, place, and the cultures, specifically focusing on the spices. So that was a bit catchy while expressing your views on your paper. So now I would turn to Asifi, who spoke about the female suffering. And actually, Asifi, I would like to comment that your paper was good, but it would have been little bit elaborative in terms of the PPT, what you had made a little bit of storyline like. So the conclusion was very fine tuned that the females, wherever they are, the blacks or the whites, or put into any cultural aspects, when they are put to trial, they are proved to be more powerful than the men. Then Baju Thomas, are you here? So Baju Thomas, he spoke about feminism, that I could broadly say that nowadays literature, uh, it is trying to bring that radical change into the perspectives of the society, like from the ages we have seen that women have been oppressed, suppressed, and the revolt literature. Broadly speaking, nowadays, what the writers are trying to term it in the perspective of the gender orientation. So it's better if you could go focusing on this area, that would really enhance your presentation. And now coming to Ansi. Ansi, so your paper was very, very wonderful. The best part about NC was that how a paper has to be presented. She was not reading it, rather she was presenting the paper. Um, Content, then again the language, and the subject was in very perfect coordination. And yeah, and moreover, she focused on all the historical unfoldings that were. And see, I would try to give you one suggestion, dear.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, see, your topic was the cultural cityscape of Chaudhary, right? So,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, it would be better to mention the entire name of the writer, like the Ahmed
Okay.
Chaudhary. Huh? Yeah,
Yes,
because
ma'am.
that's the due respect, like we can give to the writers, right? So that
Yes,
was the
ma'am.
only correction. But overall, your paper, I could claim it to be the most excellent because it was not read; it was perfectly presented. There was a fluid flow of the language, and you could have included some theme like alienation and the diasporic element also, right? So if you're working in that
Yes,
area, yeah, diaspora could also be one of the elements with the writer, Mr.
yes,
Ahmed,
ma'am.
right? So
Yes.
I congratulate all the 4 participants for giving the wonderful presentation, and I thank the organizer and congratulate the Cape Cameroon Trust for organizing such a wonderful international conference, and I would pay my support even in the future. Thank you so much.